Welcome back to another round of the Coaches Roundtable. We missed last week, so we are making up for it this week. All right, so week two in our coaching group. So, um, let's see. We last week on the our previous Coaches Roundtable, we sort of left everyone with this idea of talking about our relationship that we have with our ADHD. And one of the exercises that we do in our groups for this, and this is probably one of the oldest exercises that we have done in groups since the very beginning, is where we actually write letters to our ADHD. Um, and so we're going to talk about that, and then time permitting, we may share our letters as well that we as coaches have written. Um, I think we might. I might. I don't think Kristen said that she couldn't find her. So, it's all right. So let's first talk about what the experience felt like as because both of you were first members before you were coaches. So, we've done this a bunch of times. You've done this a bunch of times. What does it feel like? How would you describe this experience of writing letters to your ADHD and hearing other people share letters to their ADHD?
Well, for me, um, I I I have like family of origin attachment issues around my mom found my diary and started reading stuff. So I've always had trouble with writing things. Um, as I've done this practice more and more often, it's gotten easier. And I realized I was couching it a lot of times in terms of the entertainer in me. And it almost sounded it wasn't not true or authentic, yet it was couched in how do I entertain these people around how I'm talking to my ADHD and how that relationship is changing. In my relationship, because I've been in the arts world, which is ADHD friendly, uh, I realized I was okay with my ADHD because it giving it a name eventually went, oh, I'm not just a weirdo or I'm not just a fuck up. And so, what's interesting, I've been doing this for 3 years, probably, gosh, 8 times a year, maybe. I don't know. And this last one was the first time I told my ADHD to fuck off, and because I really got a little bit deeper with, and it was around communications with, loved ones and conversations and always being misunderstood or misinterpreting and things like that. So, that's kind of been my journey with it. And so I think I'm getting more comfortable with writing things about it because there were times I was just drawing pictures about it too, which is great too. It was a great way to process some of that too.
Ryan, what about you?
Well, first I'd want to put in context for folks at home. The Dear ADHD letter is an actual letter we write where we externalize the idea of ADHD as a different person that we're talking to, which sounds a little weird. It struck me as an unusual kind of thought experiment when I first tried it. I'm like, oh God, what is this? What is this? I didn't come here for
This is
this weird
woo
stuff.
woo nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what is this about? I came here to learn how to use calendars and stuff. But I actually found it really difficult and I struggled to kind of engage with it and it made me feel uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean the exercise was at the time I was like struggling with it, but that doesn't mean the exercise wasn't valuable. In fact, it was really valuable because it showed me what the issue was. Like I at the time, like I also had my family of origin issues and my trauma issues and that I was not yet really aware of or working on. But that made me struggle with feeling intimacy and being vulnerable. One of the things that I now coach around, like now my view is completely flipped. I've used like the value of or the necessity even of engaging with being vulnerable and being able to reveal things. And but at the time I was not in that place. So, but it helped me overall see the difference there. I was like, oh wow, it really opened my eyes a lot and kind of started me on the path. Even though like, but that letter was really kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Like, I felt like I was putting on a front because I wasn't really ready to be very vulnerable yet, but I still got a lot of value. It really opened my eyes to a lot of things.
In what ways?
Well, I became more aware of that, like, wow, like this is different than something I've done before. Like, and I, why does this feel, some folks seem really at ease with this, but I do not. So what is the difference? Why would that be? And why, like, what is the source of this discomfort? Start asking questions like that.
It's interesting. One of the, I think one of the reasons this exercise is as powerful as I think it is for a lot of people, it's the first time where they are hearing people speak this very vulnerable truth and say things about their experience with their ADHD. And what's so powerful about that is so many times we tend to think that, oh, we're the only ones experiencing this particular thing in this particular way. And then when we start to hear, all the other members of the group sort of saying things that we thought only we thought, when we realize that the challenges that we have actually aren't that unique, are really, I think, normalizing and connecting kind of experience.
Well, it builds trust.
Yes, and it's interesting too because for the longest time, the way I sort of would approach it in group is, I wouldn't tell people at first. So now it's like, oh, we're maybe telling too many of our secrets here. Um, but taking a trauma informed approach, I've been shifting a little bit about. So I still don't tell people right up front that they're going to be sharing it. And I think, Kristin, you were the one that came up with the idea if someone asks that, because I was like, oh no, because we've had it where someone asks if they're going to share right before we start the exercise. And I didn't want people to know because I think it would then turn into this performative piece, which is what I don't want. Right. And I think your response to that was, well, to ask with a question, right? Was if we were, would that change how you wrote it? Right.
I think you might be mixing different responses around a conversation we had about it. I think it was a different coach that was asked that question. And then someone else, when we discussed it, it may have been Brian that talked to about that question. That maybe not, I don't know, but maybe I did say that. One of the things that I will reveal is it's still powerful and revealing when someone comes in the room. I've had one time someone say, mm-mm, can't do it, don't want to do it. And when I coached them around that, they changed their mind.
Mm.
And I'm not saying I'm not the magic. They were the magic. They grew in that moment of resistance.
Yeah.
They sat with it and figured out what it was that was bothering them. And so even that idea of being reluctant to it can
Yeah,
bring about growth.
and one of the things that I've been shifting a little bit towards is when it is time to share, telling people like we really want and encourage everyone to share their letters. But I'm not like we're not going to make anybody share. And with that, everyone is shared.
Yeah, I've couched it in the idea of we are sharing, and what might it feel like for the people who shared when someone has heard everybody's vulnerability and not shared.
Right.
And the allowance to redact things, take out personal names, read a part of it that feels more easy, because we still want people to show up where they can, even if it's in baby steps. We don't want it to be all or nothing. And I'm so glad that you said, okay, so I've kind of moved from this, because I was like, isn't this a secret when you first start talking about it?
Yeah, and historically people have had like two minds about it. Like they're frustrated in some sense, but also completely appreciate and understand the intent behind it as well. And I always wonder too, like even sharing this right here for if someone ends up joining the group who hears this, is it going to be like how I am with movie spoilers? That you actually can't spoil a movie for me, because you can tell me what happens, and then when I'm in that moment in the movie, that thought of what you told me about that movie is nowhere in my mind, because I'm just like right there in the moment.
Well, and I'm curious, we also redo the exercise. This is an exercise we revisit throughout, especially if you stay in the community, and we encourage people to do it on their own. We do it again during week 10, and nobody seems to edit
Right.
how they're writing or censor their things, and they still share.
Yeah.
So, and there is a level of privacy that I'm going to say should be allowed, should be honored,
Yeah, absolutely.
because that's the only way it's vulnerable. If we open up all our vulnerability, we don't have anything for ourselves. So I'm okay with that. That's what I've figured out, is that I've cracked one. I said cracks, that it was an eggshell, really. I had to crack through that. And I think I've finally been really, really deeply vulnerable this last letter.
So, Chrissy, you said that this was the first letter that you wrote where you gave a fuck you to the ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, I don't know if your experience has been this. We usually in every season get a dear ADHD fuck you.
Oh, what I like to say is, if we don't get at least one, I start wondering who's holding back.
And mine was it this section.
Because we get a wide variety, and I use this as a preface to our discussion later about growth mindset. And we get a wide variety of people where people are starting from. A lot of people are in that ADHD is my superpower camp, which I love and respect. I get other people who are saying, like, fuck you, ADHD, you're ruining my life, which I also love and respect, because they're all valid. They're all valid expressions of our thing. And it's not about, sometimes people are very reticent to say, admit that they feel negatively about it because they feel like they're doing something wrong. I think I had one client would say, like, wow, I didn't know I was allowed to be mad about it. And I'm like, of course you're allowed to be mad about it.
Yeah, and like that right there is like, that's why we do this. Like that everything what we're feeling around our ADHD experience is okay.
Will you also speak to what we talk about right after those readings, which is that bias to the now?
Yep.
What Brian just shared. Yeah, you're ruining my life. My life is awful. And it may be somebody who won the jackpot the day before. Seriously, it's the idea of how our brain perceives our life for just half, with the experiences of half a day or an hour.
And I've probably written over 100 of these Dear ADHD letters. And you know, just to speak to that, it absolutely is this bias to the now of, like, when we think we're doing awesome, like we're doing awesome in that moment, we tend to think that we've been doing awesome and we'll keep doing awesome. And when we are getting our ass kicked by our ADHD, we have this tendency to think we've always been getting our ass kicked and we'll always be getting our ass kicked by our ADHD. And neither of those things are true. It's just now. And I think the more we write these letters over time, the more we have this concrete evidence that no matter where we are in our journey, this is just now.
Oh yeah, that's how I frame it with it when I get switched to the bias of now, is I point out that, like, I put all of my Dear ADHD letters in Google Docs. So I have a database of them, and whenever I sit down to do one of these for a coaching session, I go through all my old letters and I read them. Not all of them word for word, but I skim through them. I look them, and in the moment, I felt like, things were impossible. But when I look back on it now, it's like, I remember writing this. I remember feeling that way, but this doesn't feel like my voice anymore. That change is slow. It's gradual, but it does happen.
I'd like to share about the part where you said, and in the moment, life is going great. Or the moment's going great. So we think life is going great. And you said that's not true. For me, the bigger reason for acknowledging that is to not quit using my tools and strategies. Because if I think I'm doing awesome, I start to slack off on those things and forget that is what is helping me to do awesome.
That's why we can't go on autopilot, because we just crash and burn when we do. So, you know, we talked about how we often have this at least one person in group. This is fuck you to their ADHD. And I've mentioned that I have written at least 100 of these. And this season during our coaching group was the first time that I ever wrote a fuck you to my ADHD. And I want to share that. And it's so funny too, because where this was a week ago, and I already feel like I'm in such a different space right now, right? So it's like, case in point. Okay. And if you've been listening to the podcast recently and following stuff, you know, we've been going through a bit of a transition and some challenges sort of in the business, and this is going to address some of that. All right. So I wrote this on April 24th. Dear ADHD, I have written so many letters to you. I have written letters when I've been kicking ass, and I have written letters to you when you've been kicking my ass. While I know this is not all you, I need to tell you something that I don't think I've ever said to you before. ADHD, fuck you. Fuck you for just making things so hard sometimes. Now, I know the recent struggles I've been having in the business is not all your fault. But fuck you for having such an apparent aversion to details and for not paying closer attention to the financial health of the business. And fuck you for causing me to not to react sooner to how quickly we were running out of money because I didn't adjust the number of hours of administrative help that I was paying for, even though I knew there was more going out than there was coming in. I knew I was going to need to make these adjustments, but fuck you for letting me continue to use intuition for how I managed money when the data was there and it could have been forecasted. It's not your fault that the economy has been changing or that there are now over 120 ADHD podcasts and a recent flood of new coaches that have affected the demand for our coaching groups over the last 18 months. But shit, that didn't need to turn into the near crisis that it did. Having to go from 70 hours of paid administrative support to zero, all while trying to scramble and pull a Herculean effort to fill our groups just fucking sucked. But there's one thing that you have taught me, for better or worse, that we tend to only change and grow when not doing so would be more painful. The emotional roller coaster caused by the challenges of the last month or so was a wake-up call. Man, I wish you didn't have to be such a drama queen sometimes and that you could get my attention in ways that was not so emotionally taxing. And just in case for some twisted reason you are enjoying this, let me remind you that I am one of the most resilient motherfuckers you'll ever meet. So yes, you and your friend anxiety might have been in cahoots, but I heard you and I felt you and I see you. And I'm going to remind you once again that I can do hard things. I know you've been working with my itty bitty shitty committee, but I've been working with a gratitude practice and I've been exercising and I've been asking for help and I've even been meditating more. And I even finally took the first step for an evaluation to see if your friend autism has actually been here this whole time too. You know, they say that anger is one of the most powerful motivators in the human condition. Sure, I may have gotten more emotionally dysregulated over these recent challenges, and I'm not going to lie, I've had moments where I felt like throwing my hands up in the air and throwing in the towel around the business. I know it was you sending me these messages because you were tired of feeling so stressed and overwhelmed. But here's the thing. There's no fucking way I'm going to let you in. I'm going to continue to nurture you and support you. I may have fallen down and gotten a little bruised and beat up, but may I remind you, I have always been way too stubborn and determined to give up. My why? To have an impact on the lives of others with ADHD. So we all know that you are not alone. Oh, wait, let me read that again. It's not going to be edited for the podcast, though, or the video. My why is to have an impact on the lives of others with ADHD. So we all know that we are not alone. I read that correctly when I read it in group, and now it's not making sense. What I was trying to say is that my why is stronger than any of the challenges that I've been having, and that's to have this impact. So you threw some lemons at me. It's a good thing that I'm a damn good lemonade maker. So ADHD, I love you. I forgive you. And also, fuck you. Love me. Yeah. So I want to end it there because we want to keep these short. But part of why we do this before we get into the content of planning and our to-do lists and whatnot, which we're going to be talking about on the next Coaches Roundtable. Because when you have ADHD, if you don't touch on the emotional stuff, if you don't touch on the shame and the stuff around failure and just all the baggage that comes with living with ADHD, if you try working on and learning productivity strategies without that stuff, you're doing it with major sort of context blindness, right? Because it is imperative that we address the emotional issues around having ADHD in order to make any of the productivity and time management stuff accessible. So we will be back next time but we're going to be recording this in 2 minutes, but you're going to see it in like a week or something, because podcast time is weird. Brian and Kristin, any final thoughts on this one?
I just love that you had to trip over your words and go back and reflect. It gave us more insight. That was beautiful. Thanks. This was a great one.
Thanks. Brian?
Oh, I think I'm perfect where I am right now. Perfect. Thank you.
Love it. All right. Thank you so much, and we will catch you next time.